I live in a small, quiet town in Iowa. You know, the kind, endless cornfields, long straight roads, and the nearest neighbor is a good mile away. It's the type of place where you feel safe, where nothing ever happens. My house is old, but sturdy, and it has a basement. A dark, dusty basement that I never, ever use. I keep the door to it locked, always, so you can imagine my confusion when I came downstairs one morning and found it open. I never open the basement door, so why was it ajar? It was just a crack, barely noticeable. I probably wouldn't have even seen it if I hadn't been heading to the kitchen for my morning coffee. My first thought was that I must have left it unlocked by accident. Maybe the old latch didn't catch properly. I shrugged it off, pushed the heavy wooden door shut, heard the satisfying click of the lock, and went about my day. I didn't think about it again until the next morning. I came downstairs, and there it was again. The basement door open. This time it was wider, a dark, gaping mouth in the hallway. A draft of cold, musty air was drifting up the stairs, carrying that distinct smell of damp earth and old forgotten things. It sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. I walked over cautiously and checked the lock. It was a heavy-duty deadbolt I'd installed myself, and it was still locked, solidly in place. How could the door be open if the deadbolt was still engaged? It made no sense. I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. I pushed the door shut again, this time jiggling the handle to make sure it was secure. I spent the rest of the day trying to rationalize it. The house is old, maybe the frame warped, maybe the humidity was causing the wood to swell and contract in strange ways. I came up with a dozen logical explanations, but none of them felt right. The third morning was when the real fear set in. The door was wide open, swinging gently as if someone had just walked through, and on the dusty wooden steps leading down into the darkness, I saw them. Footprints. They were clear as day in the thin layer of dust. Bare feet, adult-sized. They weren't coming up from the basement, they were going down. My heart hammered against my ribs. I backed away slowly, my phone shaking in my hand as I dialed 911. The dispatcher tried to keep me calm, but my voice was trembling. I couldn't take my eyes off those footprints. Someone had been in my house. Someone had walked down into my basement while I was asleep upstairs. 2 officers arrived within 10 minutes. They were professional, calm, but I could see the confusion on their faces when I explained the situation. They drew their weapons and descended into the darkness. I waited upstairs, pacing the living room, every creak of the old house making me jump. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Finally, they came back up. Their expressions were unreadable. "Ma'am," one of them said, "the basement is clear." I stared at him, bewildered. "What do you mean, clear?" He sighed. "It's just a basement, full of old boxes, furniture, cobwebs. There's no one down there. No signs of anyone living there. No hidden entrances. No way in or out except through this door." They pointed out that all the windows were barred, the foundation solid concrete. There was nowhere to hide. They looked at the footprints on the stairs, just as puzzled as I was. They took a report, dusted for prints, finding nothing but my own, and suggested I install a security camera. They were trying to be helpful, but I could tell they thought I was either losing my mind or pulling some kind of prank. After they left, the silence in the house was deafening. The sun was shining outside, birds were chirping, but inside my home, a cold dread had settled in. The police were gone, but the mystery remained. Who made those footprints? How did they open a locked door, and where did they go? That night, sleep was impossible. The idea of being alone in that house, with the unanswered questions lingering in the air, was terrifying. I couldn't bring myself to go upstairs to my bedroom. Instead, I grabbed a blanket and curled up on the couch in the living room, where I had a clear view of the hallway and the dreaded basement door. I left a lamp on, casting long, dancing shadows across the room. I must have drifted off at some point, because I woke up with a start. The digital clock on the cable box glowed in the dim light. 3:08 a.m., the deepest, darkest part of the night. The house was utterly silent. And then I heard it, a sound so faint I thought I was imagining it. A soft, slow creak. It was coming from the basement stairs, the sound of weight settling on old wood, step after slow step. Someone was coming up the stairs. My breath caught in my throat. I was paralyzed, unable to move, my eyes fixed on the basement door. The footsteps continued their deliberate, agonizingly slow ascent. They reached the top of the staircase and stopped, right behind the door. The silence that followed was worse than the sound of the footsteps. I held my breath, listening, my entire body tensed. Then, I saw the door begin to move. It wasn't pushed forcefully, it was nudged gently, swinging inward without a sound, revealing a sliver of perfect, consuming blackness beyond. And from that darkness, a voice whispered, It was a dry, raspy sound that seemed to scrape its way into the air, a voice that sounded ancient and wrong. It said, "You forgot to say goodnight." That's my story. It happened years ago, but I've never forgotten it. I sold that house a week later and never looked back.